8 seconds. That is exactly how long a modern human being is capable of holding their attention on a single object before their brain starts frantically searching for a new stimulus. Do you know who has a better attention span than that? A goldfish. A goldfish can focus for 9 seconds. We have officially lost the evolutionary race for focus to a creature that lives in a glass bowl and has a memory span of 3 seconds. If you think this is just a funny statistic, I want you to look at your own workday. I sit down to write this script. I have a clear goal, I have motivation, I have a deadline. But exactly 3 minutes pass and I find myself in a strange fog. My hand is holding my phone and my eyes are watching a vertical video where a guy is cleaning a rug under loud music. I did not want to do this. I did not make a conscious decision to ignore my work. It happened automatically, like breathing. My brain just switched off the pilot and handed control to the autopilot, which drove me straight into the abyss of procrastination. For a long time, I thought I was just lazy. I blamed myself. I tried to use time management techniques, I bought planners and downloaded productivity apps. But the truth turned out to be much scarier and much simpler at the same time. I am not lazy, and you are not lazy. Your brain is not broken, it is hacked. We are trying to play chess with a grandmaster who sees our moves 10 steps ahead. This grandmaster is your own dopamine system, which engineers in Silicon Valley have learned to exploit with surgical precision. To understand how to get out of this hole, we need to stop listening to motivational speakers and turn to neurobiology. We need to understand what dopamine actually is, because what you have been told in glossy magazines is a lie. Dopamine is not the pleasure molecule. Forget that nonsense once and for all. Dopamine does not make you feel good after you eat a chocolate bar or get a like. Dopamine is the currency of desire. It is a neurotransmitter that is released in anticipation of a reward. It is the very force that makes you want and seek and achieve. In the wild, this saved our lives. Dopamine drove our ancestors to search for food even when they were collapsing from fatigue. It is the fuel for moving forward. But in the modern world, this ancient survival mechanism has turned into an instrument of our enslavement. Your brain does not care what exactly you are looking for, whether it is water in the desert or a new meme in your feed. It cares about the anticipation itself. And the entire digital entertainment industry is built on this specific mechanism. Imagine a laboratory rat in a box. It has a lever. If it presses the lever and gets food every single time, it only presses it when it is hungry. But what if we change the rules of the game? What if the food does not drop every time, but drops randomly? Sometimes it gets a sugar cube, sometimes it gets nothing, sometimes it gets a jackpot of 3 cubes. Do you know what happens to the rat? It goes insane. It starts pressing the lever endlessly until total exhaustion, forgetting about sleep and rest. This is called variable reward. Unpredictability causes a massive dopamine spike much stronger than a guaranteed reward. Now look at your phone. Does this remind you of anything? The pull to refresh gesture when you drag your feed down to update it is exactly the same lever. You never know what will drop out. Will it be boring news or an advertisement or a message from someone you like? Your smartphone is a pocket slot machine, and you are pulling the handle every 15 minutes hoping for a jackpot. Now let us face the truth and answer the question of why the book that has been lying on your nightstand for 6 months loses the battle to your phone every single evening. It is not because you are stupid, and it is not because the book is bad. It is pure energy economics. Your brain, as a biological machine, is always looking for the path of least resistance. Reading a book is an expensive process. You need to decode symbols and build images in your head and hold context, and only after 30 or 40 minutes, you might get a reward in the form of an interesting plot point or insight. TikTok or Reels are cheap dopamine. You do not need to do anything, just move your thumb. The reward arrives instantly and brightly and loudly and straight into your brain. When you have a difficult task with a delayed reward in one pocket and a free candy machine in the other, your ancient limbic brain will always choose the candy. This is not laziness. This is an evolutionary mechanism of energy conservation that works against us in the digital environment, turning us into consumers of mental fast food. But the scariest thing happens not in the moment of choice, but in the long term. Scientists call this state popcorn brain. Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to physically change under the influence of experience, and it works both ways. There is an old saying among neurobiologists that neurons that fire together wire together. If you train your brain every day to get distracted, switching your attention every 15 seconds, you are literally building superhighways for distraction in your head. You become a grandmaster of distraction. At the same time, the neural pathways responsible for deep concentration become overgrown with weeds due to lack of use. That is why when you finally decide to sit down and work, your brain starts to panic. It has physically forgotten how to stay in one state for longer than a minute. It demands a switch because you have taught it for years that boredom is a mortal threat that must be killed immediately with a new stimulus. When I realized that my brain had turned into jelly incapable of digesting even a long article, I decided that half measures would not help here. You cannot just tell yourself to focus when your biochemistry is playing against you. I needed a full system reboot, a hard dopamine calibration. I developed a protocol for 14 days that was supposed to return sensitivity to my receptors. The point is not to go to a monastery and give up technology forever, but to put the brain on a strict, boring diet. The rules were ironclad. I switched my phone screen to black and white mode to kill the visual appeal of the icons. I deleted all social media applications and banned myself from any short-form content. No shorts, no reels, no news feeds. I left only tools like maps and taxis and calls. I prepared for it to be boring, but I did not even suspect how physically painful it would be for my brain, deprived of its usual pacifier. The first 3 days of the experiment, I call the dopamine pit. And believe me, this is not a metaphor, but an exact description of the state of your consciousness. When you abruptly shut off the tap of cheap digital high, your brain does not say thank you. It starts a riot. The world around you instantly loses its colors, becoming gray and bland and incredibly dull. The fact is that your baseline dopamine level, which has been artificially inflated by years of constant stimulation, has crashed below the floor. I felt as if all the joy had been sucked out of my life. There was unreasonable anxiety and irritability. My hands constantly reached for my pocket for the phone, only to find emptiness. My brain was screaming, "Where is my reward? Where are my notifications? Why is it so quiet?" It was a classic withdrawal. Only instead of chemical substances, my body lacked information, noise. I walked around the apartment like a ghost, not knowing what to do with myself, and every minute dragged on like an hour. But the real nightmare began later, on the 5th to 7th day, when I faced the wall of boredom. It is at this stage that 90% of people who decide to do a digital detox break, because boredom in the modern world feels not just like a lack of fun, but like physical pain. We have forgotten how to be alone with ourselves. When the opportunity to plug any pause with scrolling disappeared, I was left alone with my own thoughts, and it was unbearable. I sat on the couch staring at the wall and felt everything inside me itching with the desire to do at least something. My brain, accustomed to processing information at a speed of 15 seconds, was stalling in real time. I tried to look out the window, but after a minute, I wanted to scream. It was like trying to meditate in the middle of a fire. I realized a terrible thing. I used my phone not for work and not for rest. I used it as anesthesia so as not to feel the passage of time and not to hear the voice in my head. However, this agonizing boredom is a necessary stage of healing, which neurobiologists call upregulation, or the restoration of receptor sensitivity. Imagine that you have lived at a rock concert for 10 years, standing right next to the speakers. Your hearing has dulled. You hear only the deafening bass. A whisper or the singing of birds simply does not exist for you because you have gone deaf from the volume. The smartphone is those very speakers that deafened you with dopamine bass. When you turn off the music by putting away the phone, at first there is a frightening ringing silence. It seems to you that you have gone completely deaf, but this is not so. It is in this silence that your brain starts to frantically grow new receptors, trying to catch at least some signal. It starts to turn up the volume to the maximum to hear the quiet sounds of real life. What feels like deadly boredom is actually the process of repairing your dopamine system. The brain learns to enjoy simple things again that previously seemed too quiet and uninteresting against the background of digital noise. By about the 10th day, the gray fog began to dissipate, and the world suddenly turned on in high resolution. It happened completely unexpectedly. I was eating a simple fried ite for breakfast and suddenly caught myself thinking that it was incredibly delicious. Before, I always ate with my nose buried in a screen, mechanically throwing food into the furnace without even noticing the taste, because my brain was busy digesting another video. Now, when the digital noise disappeared, my cleansed receptors were able to catch the signal from simple food. This affected everything. The music in my player sounded deeper. I started to hear instruments that used to merge into a mess. A conversation with a friend ceased to be a boring duty during which I secretly checked my watch. I looked at him and listened to his story, and I was genuinely interested. My brain, starved for stimuli, finally learned to extract dopamine from reality rather than from pixels. What used to seem bland compared to the bright screen of TikTok now gained saturation and taste. On the 14th day, I decided that I was ready for the final test. I was ready for the battle with the main boss. It was a complex and tedious professional book that I had been putting off for 2 years. I sat in a chair, I cleared everything unnecessary from the table. I set a timer for 1 hour and opened the first page. I expected resistance, I expected the familiar itch and the desire to run away. But something amazing happened. The first 5 minutes, the brain creaked a little, tuning into the rhythm of the text, and then I just disappeared. I fell into that very state that psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi calls flow. The lines ceased to be text and became thoughts. I did not notice how the hour passed. I did not notice how it got dark outside. I woke up only when the timer rang, feeling incredible clarity and calm. There was no fatigue, only pure satisfaction from the work done. At that moment, I felt like I possessed a superpower. In a world where the average attention span has shrunk to 8 seconds, the ability to hold focus on a single task for an hour makes you practically invulnerable. It was as if everyone around was running at the speed of a turtle, and I suddenly gained normal speed. I realized that my brain was never broken. It was not stupid or weak. It was simply overloaded and blinded and deafened by superstimuli. As soon as I removed the source of interference and gave the system time to calibrate, my goldfish turned back into a Homo sapiens. I could do deep work again, I could analyze complex concepts, and most importantly, I could get pleasure from it, which was unavailable to me in the mode of dopamine addiction. In a world that is obsessed with speed and multitasking, the ability for deep concentration has suddenly become the new oil. It is the scarcest and most expensive resource on the planet. Look around. We live in an attention economy where thousands of corporations with trillion-dollar budgets are fighting for every second of your time. Most people have lost this war without a fight, voluntarily renting out their brains to algorithms and turning into passive consumers of content with popcorn thinking. But if you can regain control, and if you learn to focus for at least a couple of hours a day, you automatically become the owner of an unfair advantage. While others gallop along the tops, sliding their eyes over headlines and losing their thought in the middle of a sentence, you are capable of diving into the essence. You can create and build and solve complex problems. In the era of total digital noise and distraction, focus is not just a useful skill. It is the only currency that has real value. It is your superpower, separating creators from consumers and winners from extras. It is important to understand one thing. I am not calling on you to throw your smartphone into the river and go live in the forest. Technologies are not going anywhere, and we need dopamine too, because without it, we would simply lie on the floor and die from a lack of motivation to breathe. Dopamine is not evil. It is simply fuel. It is energy for movement. The only question is, into which engine you pour this fuel and what quality it is. You can fuel your brain with a cheap, diluted surrogate from social networks that burns your neural connections and leaves behind only the soot of fatigue and apathy, or you can choose high-quality, high-octane fuel that gives you the energy to achieve real goals and the joy of a read book and the thrill of a completed project or the warmth of live communication. You cannot delete the dopamine system from your head, but you and only you decide what it will work for. Will it work for enriching Zuckerberg or for building your own life? Right now, when this video ends, you will face a choice that will define your tomorrow. The YouTube algorithm, that invisible puppeteer, has already prepared the next video for you. It is even brighter and even shorter to keep you on the hook. Your hand is already ready to click on it to get another microdose. But I ask you to stop. Pause. Put your phone down face down. Look at a blank wall, or out the window, or at your hands. Feel this boredom and allow it to be. Do not feed your internal dopamine addict. Remember that your brain is not a trash can for other people's content, but a complex biological computer created for great things. The choice of dopamine source is always yours. What will you feed your brain today?